Chapter 122. Paying in another way. Gu Qingrui and Zhou had a plan when they heard this. The two gave a pack of food to the beggar, which helped them, and went to the blacksmith's shop. They ordered 30 copper hotpots, an ordinary oven, several iron skewers, a few barbecue tongs, and a fine-toothed comb. Then, they went to a porcelain shop and ordered many plates and bowls. When they returned home that night, they were craving some barbecue. Thus, they went to the interspace to skewer some meat and had a good dinner. The next day, when the waiter of Hongyun restaurant came to pick up the goods, he handed Zhou a red contract and said, "Mrs. Gu, young Master Zhou asked me to give this to you." He mentioned that this manor is in the neighboring Xiaohe village and has 120 acres of fertile land and 500 acres of grassland. It was originally the Qiao family's manor, mainly for rearing cattle and sheep. "How much is this manor worth?" Zhou took the red contract and asked. Young master didn't say. "But according to what I know, the manor, the cattle, and the sheep are worth at least 5,000 taels of silver." "I understand. Thank you, brother. I'll personally give the silver to young Master Zhou." Young Master Zhou has been very busy recently. I'm afraid he won't have the time to see you. Thanks for the reminder." After sending him off, Zhou gave the title deed of the manor to Gu Qingrui and said, "Rui, do you think that brother Zhou has misunderstood and thinks that we want the manor for free?" "I don't think so. After capturing the county governor and mayor, he must have left behind a big mess and had to sort them out one by one. We'll find out how much this manor is worth later and pay him the silver." Gu Qingrui shook his head and said, "That's true, but he might not accept the money if we give it to him directly. I think we should give the recipe for the braised intestine to Hongyun restaurant and the method of making yuba. This way, we just have to manage our restaurant in the future." Gu Qingrui replied, "As long as you're willing to part with it, I have no objections. I just want you to live a carefree life." "Then it's decided. I'll write it down and give it to Manager Liu." After seeing Brother Tian off, Zhou turned her head and asked, "Rui, what do you think about letting Brother Tian come to the restaurant to help us? Brother Tian is a good person, and I can see that his small business is doing quite well. I don't know if he is willing to part with it, but I will ask him later." Zhou suggested, "Let's give it a try. I heard that bean sprouts are selling for a copper per pound now, and there's not much profit in it now." After lunch, Zhou took out a pen and paper and wrote down the recipe for the braised intestine, writing it in detail. For example, the ingredients needed for braised pig trotters, chicken, duck, and others were all written clearly. Honestly, without young Master Zhou's benevolence, she wouldn't have been willing to give up on this series of prescriptions. After all, these recipes alone were enough to support a 100-year-old restaurant. The makings of yuba were simple, too, it's just no one had thought of it yet. Finally, she mentioned the technique of not being greasy with red braised meat. She handed it to Gu Qingrui and said, "Rui, can you copyright it for me since I can't write in traditional words? Are you sure you won't regret giving all these recipes away?" Gu Qingrui took it and glanced at it. Then, he looked at her in shock. "I don't regret it. I have plenty of recipes in my head." Zhou replied boastfully, then turned around and left the room. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui smiled and shook his head. He knew that she was reluctant, but since she had already written it, it meant that she had already thought about it. Therefore, he did not hesitate and went to his study to copyright it with a small pen. After they were done, the two went straight to the town to find Manager Liu. Manager Liu had just finished his work when he saw the couple. He immediately approached them and asked, "Dr. Gu, Mrs. Gu. Please come in. Sorry to disturb you, but we're here today to pay for young Master Zhou's manor and to ask you who would be better at helping us to renovate it." Gu Qingrui said. Chapter 123 Taken Advantage. Young Master Zhou said the manor is a gift to you too, and we will not take any payment for it. As for the renovation, the one who renovated Hongyun Restaurant was Zhang Dainiu from the main street. If you like his skills, you can also go to him. He's an honest person, said Manager Liu. Oh, we know Zhang Dainiu. Gu Qingrui nodded. Then, he gave the letter with the recipes to Manager Liu and said, I'll have to trouble you to pass this to young Master Zhou. Consider it as payment for the manor. This. Young Master Zhou said he didn't want it. Manager Liu waved his hand. Since we said we bought it, we can't pay with nothing. Please help us give it to him. All right, but I'll just hand it over. Thank you, we'll be leaving now. Gu Qingrui nodded and went to the main street with Zhou Ying. They found Zhang Dainiu and went to Dongxing Restaurant with him to discuss the renovation work. On the other hand, Manager Liu took the letter to the county office after a short rest. He finally found Zhou Huiming in the county government office, busy dealing with official documents. After seeing young Master Zhou was done with a document in his hands, he came forward to hand over the envelope. Master, Dr. Gu gave this to you. He said it's the money for the manor. Oh, where did he get the silver from? Young Master Zhou asked curiously after receiving it. Manager Luke shook his head after hearing this. As far as he knew, the couple's money was all provided by him. At most, it did not exceed 150 taels. He didn't know where they had gotten a stack of silver notes. That's right. From the thickness of the envelope, he had thought it was a stack of banknotes. Zhou Huiming opened it curiously and was stunned when he read the recipes. He quickly looked down and smiled when he saw the last reminder, you previously said that I was too soft-hearted and should not give them a manor. Look, these recipes alone are more than enough to cover the cost of the restaurant. We've taken advantage of them. After finishing speaking, he handed the letter to Manager Liu. Manager Liu took it and read it carefully, and he couldn't stop reading. The more he read, the more fascinated and excited he became. The key was that many of the ingredients in the recipes were medicinal herbs, which he had never thought of. No wonder Chef Zhou couldn't figure out the recipe for the braised intestines. He dared say that these recipes could definitely maintain Hongyun Restaurant for another 100 years. He thought of this and said excitedly, I can't believe Mrs. Gu is willing to part with these. Indeed, but this also shows that she has a talent for cooking. As Zhou Huiming said this, he thought of the sweet and sour shredded radish that Zhou Ying made once. Tell me, why is it that even her shredded radish tastes better than others? Why can't she be born a man? He mumbled regretfully. What a pity. The corner of Manager Liu's mouth twitched. So what should we do with these recipes? Keep them. Yeah, keep them, and just take care of the couple when they open for business. Also, estimate how much these recipes are worth. At the end of the year, we can deduct them from our costs and use them as payment for the given restaurant. I understand. I'll leave you to your work then. Wait, what kind of people do you think the couple are? Manager Liu hesitated for a moment before saying, to be honest, I haven't had much contact with them, but I can be sure they're very trustworthy. I remember that there was one time when Dr. Gu couldn't come, so Mrs. Gu sent us the bean sprouts. At that time, I was sure she was not feeling well, but she still gritted her teeth and sent them to us. Also, when Elder Qiao kidnapped them, they didn't think of leaving immediately after they escaped. Instead, they reported it to our restaurant. Otherwise, we would have been lost in the dark the next day. Chapter 124 The Manor. 1. Manager Liu paused for a moment before continuing. Also, he knows his manners, knowing when to advance and when to retreat. Just like today's matter. To be honest, with your kindness, they could have silently accepted this manor without saying a word. If I were pushed out of the family, I would never help them again, let alone treat their illness for free. Of course, he might have been forced to help because of his identity, but it's rare for him to help sincerely. Young Master Zhou quipped in, "It seems you have a very high opinion of this couple." "For now, yes. But I don't know what will happen in the future." "Okay, then, let's try these recipes out." "Yes." Manager Liu replied and put away the recipes, treating them like treasures. He then hurried back. After the restaurant's renovation was settled, Zhou Ying and her husband went to the manor. At the entrance of the second courtyard, she was stopped by a man in his 30s. "Who are you two looking for?" "We are the new masters of this manor." "Who are you?" Zhou Ying asked as she flashed the title deed to him. "So it's the new owner. Please come in, Im Chang-shun, the temporary butler of this manor." After the man finished speaking, he turned around and led them into the courtyard. Gu Qingrui looked at his familiarity with the manor and asked, "Chang-shun, right? Where's the previous butler of the manor?" "They've been taken away. Anyone related to the Qiao family was taken away, and I heard they were sold to other places." "Then you are?" Zhou Ying asked. "The rest of us are either tenants or long-term workers." "Long-term worker?" "Yes, the long-term workers are mainly those who help raise cattle and sheep. The livestock here needs more care than us." "I see. Then do you know how many livestock are in here?" "I can't give you the full details, but the grassland over there is full of cattle and sheep. I heard it produces about 300 cattle and 2,000 sheep yearly, and it's much better than farming." Zhou Ying was happy to hear that. If they could produce this much every year, it would be more than enough to supply the consumption of their restaurant. She replied, "Then please take us to see them." "Come with me." Chang Shun led them to the fields after that. They could see rows of livestock sheds from afar and more than a dozen piles of hay covered with oilcloth on the side. When the group arrived, more than 10 people were busy cutting grass. Chang Shun stepped forward and introduced them. "There's a total of 30 people here, with 15 of them mainly in charge of the fodder. 10 people are in charge of cleaning up the sheep pens. 3 women who usually helped deliver newborns, taking care of the calves and lambs. There's a doctor who treats the sick livestock. Finally, a manager who is in charge of everything here. Uncle Nian," he shouted, "the new owner is here. Come and meet them." After a while, a middle-aged man in a sheepskin coat came out while carrying a tobacco pipe and a pot. He was stunned for a moment when he saw Gu Qingrui and Zhou Ying, and he said indifferently, "Are the two of you the new owners?" "Yes, Uncle Nian. We're here to understand the situation." Gu Qingrui greeted him and replied, "Do look around. But be careful when you go in, don't scare the little ones inside." "Right, there are 1,082 cows now. Before the new year, 200 of them will be ready for slaughter. There are fewer than 4,000 sheep, and we can prepare about 800 before the new year." The old man pointed at the rows of sheds behind him. "You are very knowledgeable." Gu Qingrui looked at his lukewarm attitude and was satisfied, sincerely praising him. Chapter 125 The Manor, 2. Seeing this, Chang Shun quickly led the couple to the cowshed. Zhou Ying thought it would be dirty and messy inside, but she was surprised to find it neat and tidy. Except for the lack of modern facilities, it was as good as a modern farm. Although the ground in the shed was not made of cement, it was still paved with stone. The ground was covered with straw, and some lime powder was also sprinkled on it to disinfect and dispel moisture. The key was that there was no other animal smell besides the smell of dry grass, and this was rare. When Gu Qingrui came in, he observed the cow's health. He did not expect to find 2 sick bulls, which looked like they were injured. He called over a worker who was cleaning the shed and asked, "What's going on with these two bulls? Were they fighting?" "Yes, they did fight. I didn't expect them to go into heat suddenly, and since they didn't have the time to breed, so," the employee said with a sheepish smile. "Then inform the doctor here to treat it quickly. Look at the wound, it's starting to rot. If you don't treat it soon, they will be dead." Gu Qingrui pointed at the wounds. This is indeed our negligence. Well, go and find a doctor now." The employee's face turned pale. "Yes, go." Gu Qingrui waved his hand and checked the rest. He was pretty satisfied with the results. They went to the sheep pen after that. The environment was similar, but more sheep were injured. Fortunately, they were all treated quickly, and the overall situation was decent. After the two walked around, they saw Uncle Nian sitting on the side and directing the grass cutting. Zhou came forward and asked, "Uncle Nian, can I have a word with you?" Uncle Nian nodded, then brought them into his small house. "Have a seat. It's a little shabby, but don't mind it." "You're welcome. Have you been living here all this time?" Zhou asked in surprise as she looked at the tiny house of less than 10 square meters. "I'm just an old bachelor, so it's fine as long as I have a place to stay. I don't have many needs." Uncle Nian nodded. "You've worked hard, and living in a more comfortable environment is better. It's freezing now, so construction work can't start. When spring comes next year, we'll build a row of dormitories nearby so whoever is tired can have a place to stay." "That's nice. This way, they'll be able to enjoy a good life even when they're on duty at night." The old man nodded and said. At the same time, the way he looked at them also turned more friendly. "Then it's decided. Please take care of it and see where it is more convenient to build. We'll start work after spring." "All right, leave it to me. But how do you plan to build it? How big a place is your estimate?" "The single dormitory being the size of this house is enough. If they wanted to settle down here, they could inform us in advance, and we would build them according to their family's population. However, we will have to make it clear in advance that it could only be their immediate family, which means it only includes the husband, wife, and child. Moreover, they have to guarantee to work at the manor. For a single person like you who has lived here for a long time, I was thinking of a place with an inner and outer room. In terms of size, it should be about 2.5 times the size of this house, and that should be enough." Uncle Nian replied, "It doesn't need to be that big. A small outer room will do, as we just need a place for our guests. It's about the same. So, just take my suggestion." The old man didn't say anything else. After that, Zhou learned about the overall situation of the manor from Changshan and Uncle Nian, while Gu Qingrui went out to find the doctor. He wanted to know the cattle's physical condition. On the other hand, he also wanted to exchange his experiences as a doctor. In the end, Gu Qingrui told the doctor the formula for traditional disinfection and sterilization. He suggested the doctor spray it in the sheds from time to time to prevent wounds from getting infected again. Chapter 126 The Manor, 3. At the same time, Zhou also learned that the main output of this manor was cattle and sheep. Although more than 100 acres of fertile land could grow wheat, millet, soybeans, and other grains, nothing was left after feeding the people in the manor and the livestock. If the year's harvest were terrible, they would need to buy some from outside to supplement the livestock feed. When Changshan saw them out, the couple went to the fields to look around. The wheat was growing well, but there were many cracks in the ground, and the legs of their pants had turned white. "Uncle Chang, isn't this place a little too dry?" Zhou couldn't help but frown. "It's a little dry. In previous years, there were already 2 rounds of rain and snow at this time. However, there was only one huge rain this year, barely wetting the ground. So, the land is naturally dried. However, there is no need to worry too much as the wheat is hibernating now. Even if it doesn't snow before the new year, it wouldn't have much impact once we watered it in spring and spread enough fertilizer. That's good, I'll have to trouble you with that. Zhou nodded. However, Gu Qingrui felt that this was inappropriate. It would be too late to remedy the situation then, and the harvest would definitely decrease. However, the weather was so cold that it was unrealistic to water them. It seemed that he had to water them enough before winter came. By the way, do you two want to renovate the main courtyard? Chang Shun asked when he saw the courtyard house not far away. Gu Qingrui looked at Zhou after hearing that. To be honest, he felt a little uncomfortable since Miss Qiao had lived in that courtyard for a long time. But ultimately, he left this decision to Zhou. Let's go and take a look, Zhou said hesitantly. Well, decide then. After that, the three of them went to the courtyard house. Gu Qingrui and Chang Shun went to the house to understand the manner and asked him to give them a list of who would stay and who would leave. They would have to sign a long-term labor contract tomorrow if they stayed. Zhou walked around the courtyard. Obviously, the courtyard was often occupied, and it was well taken care of. Unexpectedly, she found a storage room in the east wing of the main courtyard. Most things inside were cloth-related, and there was gorgeous silk with all kinds of cotton and sackcloth. She found a box of silver ingots and some broken silver pieces in the corner. She didn't count them and just put them into her interspace. Then, she carefully looked around and soon found a small cellar near the small courtyard kitchen. It was mainly filled with various tonics, red dates, lotus seeds, longans, and white fungus. As for the central kitchen, she knew that it must have been ransacked after looking at the broken porcelain pieces on the floor and the open cabinet door. So, she didn't bother to look there. After she was done, she returned to the main hall. I think this courtyard is well maintained. The main thing we need to do is to renovate the 3 rooms in the main courtyard. Would you like to do it yourselves? Or do you want me to arrange for someone to do it? Chang Shun stood up and asked. We'll do it ourselves at the beginning of spring. During this time, you can just find someone to come over every 3 to 5 days to help clean it up. Also, I want the security to be tightened up. Don't let anyone take anything away from the courtyard. After Zhou finished speaking, she handed him 2 pieces of silver. Don't worry. I'll do a good job. Chang Shun received the silver and smiled as he nodded repeatedly. All right, I'll leave this place to you. Do your best. We'll officially appoint you as the butler here if we see that you are capable. Thank you for your kind words, Master. It's getting late, and we should go back. If you need anything, you can come to Dongxing Restaurant or Dr. Gus' house in Shangha Village to find us. Chapter 127 Trampling on Her Dignity, Dr. Gu. Chang Shun was stunned for a moment. He sized Gu Qingrui up thoughtfully and continued, I wondered why you looked so familiar. I didn't expect you to be that Dr. Gu. Yes, if you need anything, just say the word. We're family now. Gu Qingrui smiled and nodded. Yes, I will. Then I will leave you to your work. It's getting late, so I'll go back now. Zhou said her goodbyes, and the two walked out. All right, take care, you two. Chang Shun stood up and sent them out of the manor after that. Then, he turned back, weighing the silver in his hand before happily walking back. In the evening, after the couple returned home, Zhou told Gu Qingrui about the warehouse she found in the manor. I didn't expect that there would still be things left behind after the house was ransacked. Maybe they didn't take it because it was too heavy. Don't forget that the main house's decorations, calligraphy, and paintings are all gone. That's true, but at least we won't have to buy fabric for the next 3 years. Yeah, please help me make another undershirt when you have time. Big brother Zhou took the previous one, and I don't have enough to change into. Alright, I'll make 2 more sets this time. As soon as Zhou Ying's words fell, Zhuang barked twice. Gu Qingrui immediately turned around and walked out. Seeing it was Gu Qingxi, he paused for a moment before greeting him. It's you. Do come in quickly. Third brother, Gu Qingxi greeted and walked in. However, the previously talkative boy had become somewhat reserved. Gu Qingrui took a few green bean cakes and handed them to him. What's going on? You look like a frosted eggplant, wilted, too. Do you know about the Chow family that got raided? Of course. I learned about it yesterday. Isn't this a good thing for the Gu family? It's a good thing. As a result, uncle and my father want to resume their old business. However, the family did not have enough money to buy a boat, so they thought of marrying sixth sister off. Sixth sister. But Gu Zicheng, Mrs. Huang's daughter, hasn't reached marriageable age. Zhou Ying exclaimed in surprise. Yes, Aunt Huang disagrees since she's still 5 months away. She suggested that since 4th and 5th sisters were already of age, they should be the ones getting married. There was almost a fight happening at home, so I escaped. Who are they marrying our 6th sister to? Gu Qingrui asked, deep in thought. Mrs. Huang would not have had such a big reaction if her daughter's marriage partner were decent. Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao wouldn't let go of a good marriage partner either, so it could be seen that this wasn't an ideal marriage partner. It's Uncle Mi, who was in the bean sprout business with father. I heard he's turning 30 this year, and 6th sister is marrying him as his second wife. His ex-wife also left behind a son and a daughter. The older daughter is already 8 years old, while the younger son is already 6. Isn't this just trampling on her dignity? Zhou Ying was speechless. A young girl who hadn't reached marriageable age was marrying an old man and becoming the stepmother of 2 children. No sane person would be willing to do so. Gu Qingxi nodded his head in agreement. Then, he picked up the green bean cake and gobbled it up. Gu Qingrui was silent before asking, how many days have you not eaten? You look like you are starving. Don't mention it. Ever since the incident, the food reserve at home has been plummeting. I've been staying hungry for a long time. Gu Qingxi said as he ate, stretching his neck from time to time to swallow in big gulps. Zhou Ying quickly poured him a glass of water. Eat slowly. No one will snatch them from you. Thank you, third sister-in-law. Gu Qingxi thanked her as he took the glass of water and drank it in 2 gulps. Seeing this, Zhou Ying shook her head and went to the kitchen to boil 5 eggs for him. She took a pound of braised dried tofu from her interspace and gave it to him. Have this to line your stomach for the time being. I will start cooking now, so you can eat with us tonight. Chapter 128 Discussing. Gu Qingxi shook his head. No, it's okay. I can hold on for 2 days with the food you gave me. If they know I'm here, they might come after you. Oh right, uncle and father's injuries have almost recovered, so don't go there for the next few days. Eat your food. You're still young, yet already this cunning. We know what we're doing. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he helped him peel some eggs and decided not to go over if he could. After eating some eggs, Gu Qingxi ate 2 more pieces of dried tofu and quietly returned with the food when the sky turned dark. After dinner, the 2 soaked some soybeans and braised more pig's trotters before entering the interspace. They finished whatever work was left in the interspace, and Gu Qingrui returned to his room to draft an employment contract. It emphasized their benefits and, of course, their responsibilities. After he was done, he made 60 copies with a brush. Zhou Ying took out the cloth she took and made 2 sets of undergarments and quilt covers, just in case. After they were done, they went out of the interspace and fell asleep. Zhou and De Hua continued to make tofu and dried yuba over the next few days. Gu Qingrui began to make house visits as a doctor, but he took some time off to go to the manor to sign the contracts. From the manor, only Chang Shun and a few others who planned to stay in the manor for an extended period of time signed the rest of the agreement. As for the people in the livestock area, they all signed the contract. At the same time, he would also go to his restaurant from time to time to supervise the ongoing renovation. One day, Gu Qingrui had just left the restaurant when he heard someone calling him. He turned around and saw Dr. Luo. So, he greeted, "Dr. Luo, you're not busy today." "It's all right. Recently, the government has been selling the Chiao family's shop, and this old man was considering moving to another place. The place where I was is no longer suitable." Dr. Luo sighed and said, "You've taken a fancy to the Chiao family's previous clinic, right? Did you get it?" Dr. Luo shook his head and said, "Don't mention it. That shop is too big, and it even has a big courtyard. The money I have on me is limited, so I really can't take out so much in a short time." "Oh, what's the price for the shop?" Dr. Luo stretched out a finger and said, "All empty inside, costing 1,000 taels of silver. Adding to the renovation and herbs needed to fill the place, I don't think I can pay for it, and it seems that I can only renovate my old clinic. It's indeed quite expensive." Gu Qingrui replied thoughtfully. To be honest, he also wanted a nice clinic. It was not a good thing to be a house doctor all the time, and this was an excellent opportunity. He decided to return home and discuss it with Zhou Ying. After returning home, Gu Qingrui told Zhou Ying about the matter. "Babe, what do you think about Dr. Luo and me being partners in opening a clinic? If you think it's okay, then do it. It's a good idea to have a clinic too." Zhou Ying replied without hesitation. She knew that although Gu Qingrui had learned many other skills, his favorite was still medicine. She hoped he could display his strengths, live his own life, and create his own world. "Thanks, babe." Gu Qingrui went forward to hug and kiss her on the cheek. "You're welcome. But you have to remember your main task." Zhou Ying kissed him back and reminded him. "I know. I'm here to accompany my wife, and I remember this clearly." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he looked at her face, which was becoming more and more similar to her face in her previous life. He could not help but hold his breath. At the same time, her eyes darkened as he looked at her. However, when they remembered their current age, he could only hug her tightly and say, "What do you want to eat tonight? I'll make it." Chapter 129 Visiting, "The grill you make is better than mine. So let's have grilled potatoes and chicken today." Zhou Ying pondered for a moment and decided. "All right, I'll do it in the interspace." "No problem, I'll just finish up the pig offal," Zhou Ying said, and the two of them locked up and entered her space. When she went to get the pig offal, she realized that she had been using her existing stock in her interspace all this time, and it was almost gone. She needed to talk to Brother Tian as soon as possible to decide whether he would follow them. The following day, Gu Qingrui brought 500 taels of silver with him and Tian Zhuang to town. As soon as he left, Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Yao came to visit, but they were so frightened by Heir Zhuang that they stood at the door and didn't dare to take another step forward. Zhou Ying watched from the kitchen and didn't make a sound. She hoped Heir Zhuang could scare them away so they wouldn't come here again. Unfortunately, her wish soon fell through because Mrs. Lu loudly called out her name. Zhou Ying had to put down her work and said to De Hua, "De Hua, you can try to sift the beans. If it doesn't work, turn off the fire." "I know, Aunt Gu." De Hua replied, eager to try. "Be careful and don't burn yourself." After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she turned around and walked out. She stepped forward to stop Zhuang and said, "Aunt Lu, second aunt, it seems you are quite free to come over. Come in and have a seat." "How can you say that? I'm your stepmother. How can you call me aunt?" Mrs. Liu's face darkened. "That's right, Zhou. You should call her mom, or at the very least, you should call her mother." Mrs. Yao echoed. "Mother? I never recognized you as my mother. Father and the patriarch both know this." Zhou Ying's expression straightened as she continued, "If you're here to visit, I can invite you for a cup of tea. But if you're here looking for trouble, I won't entertain you." After saying that, she let go of Zhuang, who immediately jumped and tried to bite them. If it weren't for the chain around him, he would have pounced on them and bit their necks. Luckily, this was enough to scare the two so much that they ran out of the courtyard screaming. "Ha ha ha," the satisfying laughter of sixth Aunt Gu sounded. She quipped, "My little third sister-in-law and seventh sister-in-law's skin is sure thick. You don't have the grace to raise her or even give her a decent upbringing. On the contrary, you bullied her and almost took their lives. Why should she ever acknowledge you as her mother? You sure are still in your dreams. Do they really think you two are still the same prestigious people you were? Oh, sixth aunt, you are here. Do come in for a seat." Zhou Ying came out and greeted her enthusiastically. "No, no. You've been so busy, so I won't give you any trouble." Sixth Aunt Gu shook her head. "You aren't Zhou Ying, who are you?" Mrs. Lu pointed at Zhou Ying and questioned her. Mrs. Yao accused, "Yes, Zhou Ying was a timid and weak girl who never dared to speak loudly. Look at you, which part of you is like her? So, you're here to frame me today." Zhou Ying's eyes turned cold as she stepped forward. "What do you mean by framing? You're clearly a completely different person from before, so why shouldn't we say what we observed?" Mrs. Lu shouted in panic. However, she took 2 steps back as if she was facing something scary. "Is that so? Didn't you behave like a timid cat before the princess? I heard you're also known as a gentle and virtuous lady. But look at you now. To put it bluntly, you are nothing but a crude woman now. If you don't believe me, you can ask your relatives and friends in the capital. Who would have thought that you would become like this?" Zhou Ying shook her head and said regretfully. Chapter 130 Gossip, that's right. Which part of them looks like a noble wife? She's not much better than a village woman. Sixth Aunt Gu agreed with a nod. No, she shook her head. They are less than a village woman. At least us village women don't torture people to death. You, Mrs. Lu looked at Sixth Aunt Gu with anger. However, Sixth Aunt Gu ignored her and looked at Zhou Ying. Silly girl, hurry up and go back. To deal with people like them, you should be more assertive and shameless than they are. Otherwise, you'll definitely be bullied to the point where you won't even be able to eat. Thank you for your advice, Sixth Aunt. Since you're here, come on in and have a chat. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she pulled her into the courtyard. It wasn't me who, Sixth Aunt Gu still wanted to say something, but Zhou Ying interrupted her. Come on, you haven't been to our house before, so how can you leave without coming in? Hearing that, Sixth Aunt Gu's wife did not struggle anymore and happily followed her into the house. Mrs. Lu saw that Zhou Ying had left them hanging here, getting so angry that she speechlessly pointed at her and couldn't even say a complete sentence. Sister-in-law, I think we should go back. Mrs. Yao pulled down her hand. Although she was angry, she could see Zhou Ying didn't take them seriously. So what if they make a fuss? At most, both sides would just be the joke of the village. Are we just going to let her off like this? Mrs. Lu said unwillingly. Then what can you do? I think it's better to let our husband come and find Gu Qingrui. Mrs. Yao pursed her lips. To tell the truth, she looked down on Mrs. Liu. After so many years of hard work, she finally became the main wife but couldn't even outplay a youngling. What a stupid woman. She thought of Mrs. Huang, who had been making trouble for the past 2 days, and her face immediately sank. After that, she didn't pay her any more attention and turned around to return home. When Mrs. Liu saw this, she turned her head and glanced at Zhuang, squatting at the door and staring at her. She immediately lifted her legs and trotted after Mrs. Yao. Sixth Aunt Gu, on the other hand, was welcomed into Zhou Ying's home and given a cup of sugary drink. She also grabbed half a plate of fried beans from yesterday and handed it to her. Sixth Aunt, try it and see if it's to your liking. Fried food will always be delicious, said Sixth Aunt Gu with a smile. Then, she took one and popped it into her mouth. After swallowing it, she said in surprise, "Oh, yes. It's crunchy, fragrant, and really delicious. But, it's a little salty." It's a little salty, but it's perfect for tea snacks or with alcohol. Sixth Aunt Gu paused before nodding. That's true. After that, the two of them ate and drank while they chatted. Zhou Ying also learned a lot about the situation in the village from Sixth Aunt Gu. For example, Widow Hua's daughter, Chun Hong, seems to have fallen in love with Gu Qingye. She went up to Mrs. Liu a few times in the last few days to get closer to her, but Mrs. Liu never paid her any attention. Another was that the heir of the patriarch's family had started finding candidates for marriage, but he had gone through a few families and had no intention of settling. Finally, Sixth Aunt Gu turned around to look outside, ensuring that Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao had left. She then looked at Zhou Ying with a mysterious expression and asked, "Do you know why they are here today?" "What do you mean?" Zhou Ying asked curiously. "Have you heard about the fight between their family members these past 2 days? I briefly heard they had found a marriage partner for their 6th daughter, Gu Ziqiong." Zhou Ying mentioned. "Yeah, but Mrs. Huang doesn't agree to this marriage, and they've been making a fuss. It was the old madam who decided to ask everyone to gather funds so that Gu Ziqiong wouldn't need to marry if they gathered enough. Then it should be Mrs. Huang coming here. Why are they the ones instead?" Zhou Ying paused before asking in astonishment, "They can't be thinking of cutting off Mrs. Huang's source of income, right?" Chapter 131 Collaboration, I'm 80% sure. Think about it, you will have to return the money you borrowed eventually, but it's not the same for your daughter's dowry. Once that money enters their family, it will belong to them. Sixth Aunt Gu nodded and smiled in response. They have so many twists and turns in their heads. That's why I'm saying you must be on guard against them. Don't let them trick you, otherwise, the life you've worked so hard to get will return to how it was before. Thank you for your advice, Sixth Aunt Gu. Come over and chat with us whenever you are free, you can give us more advice that way. It's fine as long as you don't find me talkative. No one is perfect. As long as you are kind, anyone will be friends with you. Yes, that's it. The most important thing about someone else is whether they are kind or not. Sixth Aunt Gu agreed with a nod. The two of them chatted for a while longer, and Sixth Aunt Gu got up to leave after another drink. Zhou Ying didn't persuade her to stay. Instead, she packed a bag of fried beans in oil paper and accompanied her out. She returned to the kitchen and got busy after that. On the other hand, Gu Qingrui arrived in town and first went to the restaurant to look. He then turned around and went to Dr. Luo's clinic. Dr. Luo, who was picking out medicine, was stunned when he saw him. "Gu, you're here. Take a seat and wait for me. It'll be done in a minute." After he finished speaking, he continued to sort out some medicine. After sending 2 customers away, he walked to Gu Qingrui, sitting on a chair at the entrance, and said jokingly, bringing a medicine kit to our shop, "Are you planning on challenging us?" "I wouldn't dare. I came to find you today because I have some serious business to discuss." "Serious business? Follow me then." Dr. Luo gave his helper a few instructions and then took him to the back. After he sat down, he poured him a glass of water and asked, "Tell me, what's the matter today?" "It's about the new clinic." "A new clinic? Are you also planning to buy that place?" "If you don't have the money, I wouldn't have it either," said Gu Qingrui. "What about your restaurant?" "Someone gave it to me, but don't tell anyone else. We are only telling the public that my wife is the manager there." When Dr. Luo heard that, he knew it was pretty complicated, so he didn't talk more about the restaurant. Instead, he smiled and said, "So, you're here today to open a clinic together. It seems that you are as wise as you are old. But yes, the clinic over there is much bigger than this one, and you wouldn't be able to handle it alone. Although I'm not talented, I do have some skills. Wouldn't it be good for us to collaborate?" "Then how do you want us to collaborate? How much silver can you take out?" Dr. Luo stretched his hand and said, 1,000 taels, this is all I have. Is another 500 from me enough?" Dr. Luo looked at him in surprise and asked, "Can you really offer 500 taels?" "Yes, well, split it 2-to-1. You get 2 shares, and I get 1. Dr. Luo looked at his solemn expression and fell into deep thought. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui did not disturb him. Instead, he warmed his hands and drank some water. After about a quarter of an hour, Dr. Luo slammed the table and decided, "All right, but you have to listen to me in terms of management. You're more experienced and have a wider network." "Of course, I'll listen to you." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry up and draft the contract, then go to the county office and buy the place. Otherwise, who knows who might take it." Dr. Luo immediately stood up and said. After that, he turned around to get a brush and ink. When Gu Qingrui returned home in the evening, he gave the contract to Zhou and said, "The matter of the clinic has been settled. Keep this well." Zhou took it and directly threw it into the villa's study in her interspace. She then told him about Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao's visit. Chapter 132 Rejection. Gu Qingrui was silent for a moment before he asked, "They didn't say what they came for?" "With 6th Aunt Gu helping out, I didn't give them a chance to speak." "That's good, ignore them. We won't be lending any money to anyone. If we can't reject them, just give them some tofu slices or dried yuba. I'm fine with it. I'm just afraid that they'll pester you non-stop." Gu Qingrui laughed and suggested, "If we really can't say no, how about we buy some land from them?" "Buy land?" "That's right. Don't forget that they have 100 acres of land. If they want money, they can exchange their land for it." "That's true, but don't reveal that we have that much money." "Don't worry, we can buy a maximum of 6 acres of land with 50 taels of silver. That will be enough for us to plant some vegetables to supply our restaurant." "All right, it's up to you then. Wash your hands, the food is ready," Zhou said as she turned around and went to the kitchen. On the other hand, after Gu Qingji and Gu Qingye returned home, Father Gu immediately stopped them. "Qingji, Qingye, what did your uncle say? Can you borrow some silver from the oil mill?" "No, Uncle said the oil mill business isn't doing well this year. Besides the clan's expenses, the clan also needs a new boat, and they definitely won't lend it to us again." Gu Qingye shook his head. "The problem is that most clan members are unhappy with us because of that boat. They don't support the patriarch to lend us any silver as well." Gu Qingji added. "They're all a bunch of ingrates. Back when our family was in its prime, they basked in our glory too. Now, they are showing us this attitude when we need their help. Such a disappointment. Mrs. Lu said indignantly. You shut up. Father Gu replied in a bad mood. Although they had helped the clan in those years, it was only on the surface level, and they barely helped anyone on an individual level, at most, just slightly more than other villagers. However, they took their land back after they came back. In addition to Gu Shengru's incident and the shipwreck, there would definitely be many who had negative opinions about them. Their oil mill could only use ox carts or rent someone else's boat to transport oil after the shipwreck. How could they have any positive image of their family? Then what do we do now? Should we change our jobs? Our family really doesn't have enough income. Mrs. Lu wanted to say something but hesitated. The main issue was that there was little money left in the family. She didn't want to fork out any more of her personal savings, or else what would she provide for her children? Father Gu turned to look at her and asked, "Change my profession. Do you have any ideas? Take your time to think about it. There will be something. Can't you see that Qingrui and his wife are selling tofu quite well? I recall that mother's snacks were delicious, as was second aunt's porridge. Why don't we open a small shop?" Gu Qingye suddenly suggested. Eateries. It's fine if we make it for ourselves, but we'll be dead exhausted if we sell it. Mrs. Lu unhappily glared at him. Father Gu disagreed with his idea too. He didn't want others to think that he was a man who lived off his woman. Also, the issue was that selling eateries would never make a fortune. He had to find another way to buy a boat. However, on second thought, selling eateries would temporarily relieve their financial issues. He nodded and said, "I think you and sister-in-law can give it a try. Didn't you manage a shop when you were in the capital? You can earn some pocket money this way." "But darling, managing an eatery shop is dirty and tiring. How can we do that kind of work?" Mrs. Lu said in horror. "What do you mean that kind of work? Didn't you envy Qingrui and his wife selling tofu? Do you think it's easy to grind beans and cook tofu every day?" Father Gu snorted coldly at this point and reminded her, "You used to think that cooking was difficult, but now you are used to it. Wouldn't it just be a thing to get used to?" Chapter 133 Acceptance. Mrs. Liu's face turned red when she heard this, but she couldn't say anything to refute it. "It's settled then. I'll try to rent a small shop in town. At least it's better than you guys fighting at home every day." Father Gu immediately decided. "Then why not Mrs. Gua and Mrs. Sun go? They are more skilled at cooking than us." After hearing this, Father Gu looked at her deeply and said, "So you're willing to carry water, gather firewood, and serve the whole family at home every day? Just go and try it for 2 days. I'll ask Mrs. Gua to try if you can't do it." When Mrs. Lu heard this, she immediately thought of her shoulder, which had been swollen for several days from carrying buckets of water over her shoulders. She immediately shrank and replied, All right, I will give it a try." She then looked at Father Gu and suggested, "By the way, darling, Qingrui should be back by now. Do you want to go and look for him? Maybe he has some silver in his hands." "I'm not going. Don't you have any ideas about him?" Father Gu went back to his study after that. Previously, Gu Qingrui treated the two brothers' injuries and even gave them medicine for free. It would be worth quite a lot of money, and the young couple's small business couldn't even earn much. He wouldn't be able to get anything if he went now, and more importantly, he was too embarrassed to ask for anything else. Mrs. Lu still wanted to say something, but Gu Qingye's gaze stopped her. He knew well that although his father had rejected his third brother and his wife, Father Gu no longer had hostility toward them. If Mrs. Lu continued this, she would only cause trouble. The other family, who had been listening to the commotion outside, was disappointed when they heard the final verdict. Especially Mrs. Yao. She had wanted her brother-in-law to go over and avenge them, or at least, pester the pair of jinxes. Unfortunately, it ended with nothing. After that, she sighed and said to second Uncle Gu, "Big brother seems to be soft-hearted toward Qingrui now." Second Uncle Gu didn't reply. After all, they couldn't treat the young couple the same way they did in the past since they had saved their lives. Besides, they hadn't done anything unforgivable. "Darling, are we really going to open a shop in town?" Second aunt asked again. "There's nothing bad about it. After all, we still haven't bought a boat. Also, one of our family members will be giving birth soon in the new year, and there will be many places where we will need money. We can't always rely on this little bit of money, right?" But Mrs. Yao wanted to speak but stopped. Ultimately, she thought of her brother-in-law's reply and swallowed the words at the tip of her tongue. Since they were all working, why not do something in which she could make the decisions? At least the money would be in her hands if they fought over it. If it was someone else, with someone else between them, who knew if the other party would try to hide their profits? The next day, after Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao knew they could not borrow money from others, they went to the town to rent a shop. Gu Qingrui waited for 2 days and was relieved when he did not see his father. In the blink of an eye, another 5 days had passed. The young couple's new restaurant in town had been renovated, and they went to check it out. The decorations were straightforward. They just removed the older decorations inside, brushed the main hall with white paint, and painted a group of cattle and sheep leisurely on pasture on the walls. The second floor was even more straightforward. After the white paint was applied, pictures of their signature dishes were pasted on the wall. This was an oil-painted draft printed by Gu Qingrui. Although it was not as clear as conventional photography, the colors were bright, and they could still make customers drool. Then, he had several paintings with plums, orchids, chrysanthemums, and bamboo. There were even lovely paintings of tools, chess, books, and others. Finally, there was the kitchen. The pots and pans were all replaced with white stones that were easy to clean, making them look clean and tidy. Chapter 134 Buying Labor 1. What do the two bosses think? Are you satisfied? Zhang Daniu asked after they were done with the tour. Not bad. Who did you find to paint this? It's not half bad. Gu Qingrui asked. I discovered an academy scholar who is also a nephew in our clan. Because his family is poor, he will come out to do some work, such as writing letters, calligraphy, painting, and so on. This time, 2 big and 4 small paintings cost 10 taels of silver. That's reasonable, and it's worth the price. Help me pass on a message. Ask him to come over when he's free. I want him to draw something else. Sure, I'll thank you for your appreciation on his behalf. It's a total of 30 silver coins this time, right? Yes, only the stone slab and the painting are worth some money. Honestly, I've never seen this style of renovation before, but the way it turned out isn't bad. I think I will have to change my style more and can't just stick to the old way. Simplistic is elegant, easy, and true. You educated people sure have lively brains. Zhang Daniu was stunned for a moment before laughing out loud. After settling the bill, Zhang Daniu brought his men and left. Gu Qingrui turned his head. Babe, take a look and see if anything else needs to be changed. If there's nothing else, you'll get someone to move the tables and chairs that have been changed. No need. When you're on your way, ask if the bowls and plates have arrived. Also, it'll be 3 days before the pot and the signboard are ready. We have to find a fixed palace to provide us with smokeless coal. Gu Qingrui smacked his forehead. I forgot to tell you that I got to know a charcoal maker through Dr. Luo. I've already ordered 2,000 pounds, and I'll be here in 2 days. Then we're just short of workers. The backyard has been cleaned, so let's get some workers now. Alright, well head over after we're done here. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. Then, he went to the labor market and found a few people to help clean up. He also informed the porcelain shop and didn't expect all kinds of tableware to be delivered in less than 15 minutes. After Zhou checked them one by one, she made sure there were no defects and paid the bill. She was surprised that these porcelain pieces cost nearly 100 taels of silver. There was quite a difference in price between fine and coarse porcelain. After arranging everything in the restaurant, Zhou put all the plates and bowls into her inner space, washed them with the dishwasher, disinfected them, and then put them on the bowl rack. After that, the young couple found a labor dealer with manager Liu's recommendation. Zhou was shocked when she saw a ghost-like woman sitting in the room, but she quickly restrained her emotions and asked, "Are you Granny Ma?" "You're." The woman raised her head and sized them up. Seeing that they were dressed in ordinary clothes, she couldn't figure out their purpose for a moment. She frowned and hesitated to speak. "We were introduced by Uncle Lu from Hongyun Restaurant. We want to buy a few servants with till-death contracts," Zhou said. "So you're here from old Liu's recommendation. Please have a seat." When the woman heard this, her attitude immediately changed, and she greeted them with a smile. Zhou saw that she was about to pour them tea and stopped her. "Granny Ma, don't worry about it. We're not thirsty, so let's see who you have first." "No problem. What kind of people do you want to buy? Or rather, what kind of people do you want to use?" Granny Ma immediately put down her cup and walked over. "We want to open a restaurant, so we're looking for someone who can cook. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. Also, if there are young men available, we will buy 2 of them." Granny Ma chuckled when she heard that. "What a coincidence, I have had a group of new people here recently. I'll call them all over, and you can choose whoever you want." After that, she slowly hobbled to the backyard. Chapter 135 Buying Labor 2. If it weren't for Uncle Liu's introduction, I would have thought we were at the wrong place. Gu Qingrui smiled and shook his head. Zhou rolled her eyes at him and said, "You know it very well, don't you? Television media left such a deep impression, after all." Gu Qingrui quickly raised his hands and said. After hearing what she said, she also thought of the pimps in most TV dramas who tried to solicit customers, especially the women who stood on the street in war movies. Soon, Granny Ma led a group of people in. There were men and women, young and old, and even babies. It seemed that Granny Ma was a good person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have kept a baby. Then, she realized something unusual. How could a labor dealer sell babies? Thus, she asked, "Granny Ma, what's the deal with them? Why are they bringing a baby with them? Don't mention it. One of them was pregnant 2 months ago, but I have to take them in no matter what. They are officially enslaved people." Official slaves? Yes, from the south. The documents said they were illegal salt traders in their clan, and I don't know any more details. When Zhou heard this, she immediately remembered the Gu family's incident, and they seemed to have suffered the same fate of being exiled. Now that she thought about it, it was lucky that the Gu family was only raided and exiled. If they were made into officially enslaved people, they would never be able to see the light of day again. At the same time, Gu Qingrui also realized that and suddenly felt a wave of fear. The Ming dynasty's official slaves were servants used by the officers' families and were people who were lower than the general till-death contract servants. They were the same as slaves, animals, and people who were unimportant even if they died. The main takeaway was that they would be slaves for generations without any freedom other than an official special pardon. Are they all official slaves? Zhou asked after calming down. No, only this family of 3. The rest are not. That's good. Zhou stood up and glanced at the crowd. Regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, those who can cook, step forward. The cooking I'm talking about is not just cooking normally, you must at least have some unique skills. As soon as she finished speaking, only 2 women and a man stood out from the group. Is there no one else? Zhou asked again. Then, another man stood out from the crowd but was hesitant, and it was apparent that he was in a dilemma. What's wrong? Zhou pointed at him and asked, do you know how to cook or not? Yes, I was a chef before, but... You are hesitating about our employment, right? Tell me, where did you work as a chef? Gu Qingrui said. I was a chef in a prominent family in the capital before, but I was sold because I offended someone. We want to open a restaurant. Do you want to do it or not? Open a restaurant. The man's eyes immediately lit up. He didn't want to be a servant to a prominent family anymore. It would be fine if it were a harmonious family, but if it were a family with many disputes, he would have to live in fear every day for fear of being used by others. However, he feared his skills would be wasted if it was an average family. It would be best if he could enter a restaurant. Sure, but I'll have to bring my wife and children along. After that, he pulled out a woman and a 7 or 8-year-old boy from the crowd. All right, stand to the side first. Zhou glanced at the 2 of them and nodded after ensuring they were clean and tidy. With 2 men and 2 women, she didn't want to hire any more chefs. She went up and picked 3 neatly dressed young men and said, Granny Ma, just these few. Old Lu introduced you, so I won't waste my time haggling. The 3 women are worth 10 taels each, the 5 strong laborers are worth 12 taels each, and the child is worth 5 taels. At this point, Granny Ma counted with her fingers and concluded, 95 taels in total. Chapter 135 Signature Dish 1. Granny Ma, are you trying to do a one-time deal? If I remember correctly, a woman would only sell for 8 taels of silver at most, and only a young and beautiful virgin could be sold for 10 taels. Zhou said with a faint smile. The original her grew up with a group of servants. She couldn't guarantee anything else, but she was very clear about the price of buying labor. Well, you know, they are all people with skills, so, Granny Ma said with a smile. No matter how skilled they are, their age and physical condition are obvious. For Uncle Liu's sake, I won't haggle further. How about 90 taels? Granny Ma hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right, then 90 taels it is. If you need more in the future, you have to come to me. All right. After Zhou agreed, she immediately gave her 9 silver ingots. Granny Ma took them and weighed them in her hands. Then, she turned around and took out their indenture contracts. If you need anything in the future, just let me know so I can prepare for you in advance. I will. Zhou promised, and she took a group of people out of the labor dealer. First, she took them to a clothing shop and bought them 2 sets of ordinary clothes. At the same time, she bought a mattress for each of them, including the couple. After they came out, Zhou gave their contracts to Gu Qingrui and said, Rui, go to the officers to register them under us. Okay, I'll go to the restaurant to find you. Gu Qingrui answered and left with the contracts. As for Zhou, she took a group of people back to the restaurant and said, other than the main house, you can choose your room anywhere else in this courtyard. I'll give you 15 minutes to make your choice and gather back here. Yes, madam, the few of them immediately started discussing where they should stay. Zhou saw they were harmonious, so she didn't care about them anymore. Instead, she turned around and went to the kitchen. Since they were going to live here, she should prepare some food. They didn't have much firewood left, but the remaining wood from the renovation should be more than enough to burn for 3 to 5 days. There was no food or vegetables. She took out 50 pounds of black flour, 50 pounds of crushed rice, 10 pounds of millet, a bag of sorghum, and a bag of beans from her interspace. Also, there were cabbage, carrots, and some dried vegetables. She didn't have pots here yet, so she took out a set of 5 pots of different sizes from her interspace that she had stolen from the Chow family's house. As for spices, she didn't take out any. Instead, she planned to give them some silver and let them buy it themselves. It could also be considered a test of their cooking skills. Then, she walked out and waited in the courtyard. After a while, the group of people came out of their living quarters and stood in a line, waiting for her orders. When Zhou saw this, she knew these people were probably trained and must have worked for a prominent family before. "All of you, tell me your names and what you are good at," she asked directly. The hesitating chef was the first to speak. "My name is Li Xing, and am good at cooking. Stir-fried meat is my specialty. This is my wife." Zhou interrupted him. "Let her say it herself. She's here to work in a restaurant, so even if she lacks skills, she needs to be able to speak and talk to people. When a customer asks her something, she will have to answer the question clearly." When Zhou said this, she looked at the woman and said, "Will that be a problem?" No, I used to work in a sewing room and am good at cutting clothes. As for my name, it's a name that my master gave me in the past. Please give me a new name." The woman answered as she bowed. "Mistress, please give us a name." The others echoed. Even the little boy chimed in with the others. Chapter 137 Signature Dish 2. However, Zhou was not good at giving names, so she had to ask, "Don't you have names? If you have original names, can you keep them?" "My name is Fong Qing. I know some martial arts and was previously the coachman in my previous residence." At that moment, the strongest-looking young man spoke. "I am Zhao Qing. Previously, I was in charge of my elderly master's food. I am good at making soup, especially herbal-type dishes." A male chef stood out and said, "Then why did you leave the residence?" Zhou asked curiously. Those who had served their elderly master usually had the benefit of seniority in their residence. Even if the elderly master didn't put them in an important position, he wouldn't sell them out. The man was stunned and replied, "Do you still remember the official slaves back there? I was in the same batch, sold after my previous master's family was in trouble." Zhou nodded and looked at the others, but they didn't speak up. After pondering for a moment, she pointed to the 2 young men and said, "Then you will follow your new master's surname. The older one will be called Gu Wen, and the younger one will be called Gu Wu. As for the little boy, you will follow your father's surname, Li, and I will give you a first name, Yu. I hope you'll be happy with this." "Thank you for the name, madam," the 3 of them said at the same time. Gu Wen then introduced himself. "I'm Gu Wen, and I've learned how to write from a steward in a manner for a few years. As for what I'm good at, it's probably running fast. I'm Gu Wu, a slave. I was born into a peasant family. If I have to say something I'm good at, it would be being diligent." Zhou nodded. Gu Wen looked younger than Gu Wu, but she could tell that Gu Wen was smarter than Gu Wu. Then, she looked at the 3 women with a troubled expression and said, "Mrs. Li, I'll just call you Mrs. Li and use your old name. As for the 2 of you, the older one will be called Chun Nyang, and the younger one will be called Chiu Nyang. I'm Chun Nyang. I'm good at making desserts and best at making silver silk rolls. I, Chiu Nyang, have opened a shop before. I'm best at making dumplings, rolling noodles, and stir-frying vegetables." Chun Nyang was fair and clean, while Chiu Nyang was dark and thin. After remembering their characteristics, she nodded and said, "Is there anything else anyone wants to add? If you do, say it as soon as possible. Otherwise, don't blame me for not giving you face when things get out of hand in the future." Everyone looked at each other for a moment, but no one spoke again. "Let's confirm again. Is there really no one?" Everyone shook their heads. "Very good. In that case, I hope that everyone will work hard together in the future and run the restaurant well together. Whoever performs outstandingly, I can return your freedom to you in 10 years. Of course, if you perform well and don't want to leave, I can take care of you in your old age. Is there anything else you want to add?" Zhou asked after she finished. "Will Mistress really give us our freedom?" Li Sheng asked nervously. Mrs. Li also looked at her expectantly after hearing that. Although they didn't have much hope, their son was still young, and they had hoped for him to lead a normal life. "I'm a person of my word, and I'll naturally fulfill my promise to you. Everyone can be a witness to each other." Zhou raised her hand and said, "Thank you, Mistress." When Li Sheng heard this, he and his son, Li Yu, knelt with a plop. "All right, it's getting late, and it would be best if you guys cleaned up. I prepared some grains and vegetables in the kitchen in advance. Tomorrow, everyone will show off your skills, and I will start to assign tasks according to your skills. Of course, I will also point out your shortcomings. May I ask what kind of special restaurant Mistress wants to open?" Zhao Qing asked curiously. "Well, have hot pot and barbecue as the main dishes, with some minor side dishes. So, you must bring out your unique skills tomorrow so that I can set the menu." After Zhou finished speaking, she gave Zhao Qing 5 taels of silver and said, "If you lack anything, you can prepare it yourself, and just record the bill." Chapter 138 Liu's Dessert. "Thank you for your trust, Mistress. We will do our best." Zhao Qing bent over and picked the silver ingots up with both hands. "You guys go ahead. We won't stay here tonight, so you guys close the doors and windows." Zhou waved her hand. After that, she went to the blacksmith's shop to ensure the work could be completed on time. Then, she returned to the restaurant and happened to meet Gu Qingrui on the way. After Zhou took the indenture contracts from him, the two discussed something and then separated ways again. Afterward, Gu Qingrui went directly to the new clinic, while Zhou returned to the village. When she passed the grocery store, she remembered that there was no more salt brine at home, so she went in and bought a pound. After she came out, she heard Gu Cheng's familiar voice near her. She listened to his voice, shouting and selling his goods. She walked over curiously and didn't expect to see Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao selling desserts while Gu Qingxi invited customers to the entrance. She raised her head and looked at the shop signboard, Liu's Desserts. She stood and found that they were still selling high-end desserts, such as juju paste shortbread and pine nut lily pastry. But business wasn't good, as not many people bought them. She shook her head, turned around, and walked back. Few people would be willing to buy such high-end snacks in this small town and in such a small shop. On the way, she collected 2 sets of fresh pig offal. After returning home, she began to sift through some soybeans, but this time she only sifted enough for Hongyun restaurant. As for dried yuba, since the recipe had been given out, it was time to stop making it. Thinking of this, she took 100 copper and went next door. When she saw Sister Tian making clothes in the courtyard, she greeted her, "Sister Tian, you are busy today." "Oh, you are here. Come in and have a seat." Sister Tian invited her in as she rolled up the cloth and placed it into a bamboo basket. "Oh, there's no need, you can continue your work as it's just a matter of a few words." After Zhou said that, she handed her the string of copper coins. "This is for De Hua's salary. I've sold the yub making process, and Dehua doesn't have to come to make more. Why did you sell it? I heard that Yuba is selling nicely and quickly. Did someone bully you? No, I promised to help someone run a restaurant, so I don't have time to do it. I see. It's good to have a fixed job. Sister Tian paused for a moment at this point before continuing. Dehua hasn't worked for a month yet. I can't accept this money. Sister Tian, just take it. She's quite capable, and we don't want to dampen her enthusiasm. We might need her help in the future. Shouing said hurriedly. By the way, when Brother Tian comes back tonight, can you tell him to come over? We have something to talk to him about. Sure, I'll tell him when the time comes. Then I'll go back now. Don't you want to stay and have a chat? Thank you, but I'll come again when I'm free. After Zhouing finished speaking, she turned around and went home. In the evening, Qian Zhuang and Gu'er Jiang returned with the ox cart, but they didn't come back with many soybeans. After unloading the cart, Qian Zhuang said, Mrs. Gu, we've come to an end. We really are unable to collect any more soybeans in this area. It's not worth it with another increment of 1 copper per pound, and you guys might as well buy it from the shop. There's still work to do, but you won't be collecting soybeans. You will collect carrots, cabbages, and winter melons from tomorrow onwards. Also, if you encounter a carrot with a red heart, you must buy them. You'll transport it directly to the original Dongxin restaurant when the time comes. I'll get someone to settle the bill for you. Remember, the vegetables you collect must be fresh. Don't take the frozen ones. If I'm satisfied with your performance, this job will be permanently yours in the future. You guys are going to open a restaurant. Did you strike gold? Qian Zhuang asked in astonishment. Gu'er Jiang was also so shocked that his jaw almost fell to the ground. Chapter 139 Recruiting. No, we didn't strike gold. Don't I have good cooking skills? Someone took a fancy to my skills and wanted to hire me to be a restaurant manager. I thought I could earn more there and wouldn't be as tired, so I agreed to their offer. Zhouing replied with a smile. That's still a good thing. Such a big restaurant manager would earn at least 5 taels of silver a month. Gu'er Jiang said with an envious look. Right, right. In the future, us brothers will follow you two around. You can't just leave us alone. Qian Zhuang nodded in agreement. Recently, because they had been going out to collect soybeans every day, the villagers noticed they had started to work seriously and had begun to give off a better impression. There were even people who had started to matchmake them. Although they were all widows or women with issues, it was a good start. If they could continue to work steadily, it wouldn't be impossible for them to marry a wife they liked. I'll repeat the same thing. As long as you do your best, we'll definitely continue to hire you. Alright, we can rest assured with your words. We'll start collecting vegetables from tomorrow onwards. Remember to send them to the original Dongxing restaurant. It doesn't have a new signboard yet. Alright, we'll be leaving then. Do you guys still have enough money on you? Yes, it's enough to last 2 more days. Qian Zhuang said his goodbyes and walked out with Gu'er Jiang. After they left, Zhouing put the 20 pounds of soybeans into her interspace and went into the kitchen to start cooking. After Gu Qingrui returned, the two had just placed food on the table when Tian Jiawang came over. When he saw them eating, he paused for a moment before turning to leave. Gu Qingrui quickly called out to him. Brother Tian, since you're here, let's eat together. We can have a drink together too. Yes, yes. You boys eat first while I go to the kitchen to finish cooking. Zhouing told them as she turned around and returned to the kitchen. Tonight's dishes were pretty delicious. There was a plate of twice-fried pork, a plate of tofu with cabbage, a plate of cold mixed shredded tofu salad, and millet porridge with black steamed buns. After that, she fried a plate of salted peanuts and another plate of scrambled eggs with scallions. After returning, although the three of them were sitting at the same table, Zhou did not participate in the drinking. She quickly finished eating and retreated to the side. After 3 glasses of alcohol, Tian Zhuang looked at Zhou and said, "Sister-in-law, my sister said you were looking for me. Is there something you need?" "There's something, but it's better if Qingrui tells you," said Zhou. Gu Qingrui told him why they were stopping their current business, then said, "So, I'm afraid that I can't supply you with more goods when we are busy. However, the restaurant is still short of staff. I wonder if you would like to come over. But I don't know how to help out in a restaurant." "What do you mean?" "It's relatively easier to learn to make skewers. If you are willing to come over, you will be in charge of making skewers." "Yes, the meat for skewers is marinated beforehand, and the ingredients are also prepared in advance. You just have to control the heat well." Zhou agreed. "Can I really give it a try?" "Sure, if you can stay, you'll get 1 silver a month." "Will you still be able to supply for tomorrow?" "I have a few regular customers, so I must inform them tomorrow." "All right, we will supply you 1 more day." "Okay, thank you for your hard work. It's a matter of mutual benefit." After Zhou finished speaking, she went to the kitchen to make some braised intestines and dried tofu. Tian Zhuang finished his meal and went home to tell his sister about the matter. He said, "Big sister, you should grow fewer bean sprouts from now on, as there's only a limited amount of time I have to send them out to a few regular customers. This is great news. Not only will your income stabilize, but you also don't need to be exposed to the elements while working. You don't have to worry about the bean sprouts, I can deliver them." Big sister Tian said happily. "Maybe it's better if I go." "I can, don't worry. I can do it. You have to work hard when you go there. This way, you might be able to land a wife in half a year." "All right, if it's too hard to go over for the delivery, you better not force yourself." "I know." Chapter 133. Years. The next day, after Tian Zhuang collected the goods, Zhou and her husband went to town with him. After they parted ways in town, the couple went to their restaurant. Gu Qingrui got to know everyone and then went to his clinic. Zhou stayed behind and began to check everyone's dishes. When she arrived at the kitchen, she looked at the ingredients they had bought. The meat was fresh, and one could tell it was good quality meat. The seasonings were all prepared, and she also found some medicinal herbs she had never thought of, such as rhizome and chuanxiong. These were great tonic herbs. "Zhao Qing, did you buy the herbs?" she asked. "Yes, I want to make a nourishing herbal soup today. I will use chicken, duck, cuttlefish, goose, pig's belly, pork ribs, and other tonic herbs. This soup is suitable for the elderly, pregnant women, and those with weak bodies." Zhao Qing added. "It will probably take a lot of effort, so go ahead and start." After Zhou finished speaking, she looked at the crowd and said, "Start when your ingredients are ready. Make everything yourselves as I want to test your skills." "Yes, mistress," everyone responded and turned around, each finding their own ingredients and busying themselves. Mrs. Li, on the other hand, helped to start the fire. As for the 3 young men, she sent them out to find a store selling large quantities of chili. This was the most important matter in their restaurant's opening, and it had to be settled as soon as possible. After that, Zhou walked over to Liu, sitting on a small bench in the courtyard and practicing writing on the ground. She said, "Little fellow, you can read?" "Yes, mistress. I can read, but not much. My father and mother taught me what I know." Liu quickly stood up and bowed. "There's no need to be so polite. Just sit down." Zhou pulled him to sit down, and she looked down at the words he was practicing. They were all simple surnames of people. For example, Zhou, Wang, He, Hua, Shi. Do your father and mother know many words? She asked. I'm not sure, but my father can write down all the commonly used names. My mother, on the other hand, is a little lacking. Do you like to read? I like it. When I was in a residence, I envied Brother Dongzi, who was a study attendant. He learned many words from the young master. Is that so? How about I send you to school? It'll give you 3 years, and if you can get a recommendation letter from the headmaster after 3 years, they'll give you freedom and let you continue your studies. Really? Li Yu was overjoyed, but he shook his head. No, I'm a servant, I have to work. How much work can you do? At most, you will be keeping the fire from burning out. How about this? When you come home, you can help with the work while studying, and I won't give you a monthly salary. How about it? Li Yu was both surprised and delighted, not knowing what to say for a moment. Then I'll discuss it with my father, he mumbled. After hearing her suggestion, he got up and ran into the kitchen. Li Yu excitedly told Li Xing about Zhou Ying's offer. After Li Xing heard this, he was so shocked that he almost cut his finger off. When he saw Zhou Ying, who followed Li Yu in with a smile, he asked in disbelief, Mistress, is what he said true? Of course, he's still young and can't do much. It's better to let him study for 3 years, and if the headmaster can recommend him to take the scholar's exam, I'll let him take it. If he doesn't get that recommendation, he'll be able to return to the restaurant to help with his writing and reading skills. But, of course, his monthly salary will be gone while he studies. Of course. Thank you, mistress. Thank you so much. You've given him a way out. Li Xing nodded repeatedly. At the same time, he bent his waist lower and lower, almost kneeling down. His wife, Mrs. Li, pulled Li Yu down to their knees and said, Thank you for your kindness, mistress. Chapter 141 Taste Testing. Mrs. Li, please get up. As I've said before, anything is possible as long as you guys do your best. Zhou Ying said as she helped her up. Mistress, you are too benevolent. This servant will definitely do a good job. Chun Yang immediately replied. She wasn't young anymore, and she wasn't a free person. The possibility of getting married was almost zero, so it was better to show her loyalty early so that she could have a place to retire. Yes, we will definitely do a good job. Everyone immediately echoed. At the same time, their faces were filled with joy and hope. I believe that, so hurry up and get back to work. I'm still waiting to enjoy a delicious meal. Zhou Ying reassured them, took Li Yu back to the courtyard, and taught him a classic poem. She didn't expect the boy's brain to be this smart, being able to remember and recite it to her after being taught 3 times. However, she only taught him a little. After teaching him 5 sentences of the poem, she let him go to the side to play. She turned around and tidied up the main house. Although they did not intend to live in town, if something happened, or it rained, or especially if there were a heavy snowstorm Mrs. Bai once mentioned, the couple would have to have a place to stay. By the time she was almost done with her work, the servant's signature dish was nearly done. First, it was Li Xing's stir-fried meat. Red and green vegetables were bright yet distinct from each other amongst the meat sauce, as well as the thickness of the meat slices was just right. If it weren't for the fact that the green chili had wilted and lacked some sparkle to it, the appearance of this dish would definitely have been full marks. She picked up a pair of chopsticks, picked up a piece of meat, and put it into her mouth. The meat was tender, smooth, and with a hint of spiciness. It was refreshing, and it was indeed a good dish. Then, she gave him the recipe for twice stir-fried pork and said, "Try to make this dish." "Alright, I'll do it now." Li Xing had a look of joy on his face as he turned around and started making it. Next was Qiu Nyang's dumplings. It was fresh, fragrant, and chewy, stuffed with pork and scallions. It was delicious, and it seemed Zhou Ying could hand over making the restaurant's meatballs to her. After eating, she judged, the dumpling filling is well mixed, but the wrap is a little too thick. If you want to make dumplings in the future, you can use light salt water to mix with the flour or add an egg inside to increase the toughness of the flour. Thank you for your guidance, mistress. I will remember it. Qiu Nyang replied thoughtfully. Next was Chun Nyang's silver silk vegetable rolls. The rolls were yellow, probably roasted, and looked beautiful. After tasting one, she commented, "It's sweet and delicious, with a hint of milk." "Did you put milk in it?" "No, it's cream, isn't it?" Mistress sure has sensitive taste buds. "I did put in some cream," Chun Nyang affirmed. "Yup, in the future, make it smaller, the kind that can be eaten in 2 bites. Also, research 5 types of desserts and make a dessert platter. Oh right, there are also all kinds of bean and chestnut cakes. You can make them into a plate or 2. Zhou Ying suggested and gave her the recipe for scallion pancakes and left the rest to her. When Zhao Cheng's soup was served, it was already noon. Gu Qingrui had just returned, so everyone took half a bowl and tried it. After Gu Qingrui finished drinking, he nodded and said, "Babe, this soup is amazing. It's refreshing, fragrant, and without any medicinal smell. It's very delicious. If you like it, we can have one from time to time in the future. Then I'll be waiting." After the meal, Zhou Ying went to Hongyun restaurant and bought a bag of lamb bones from Manager Liu. However, Manager Liu didn't want the money, so Zhou Ying said, "Uncle Liu, I'm thinking of buying all the lamb bones here in the future. You can't keep giving them to me for free. However, leave a little more meat on the top. These bones are stripped too clean." Chapter 142 Recruitment. You're not considering selling bones in such a big restaurant, are you? That's not going to attract high-end customers. Manager Liu said, shaking his head. I'm not in the business of bones but of beef and mutton. But I'm worried there won't be enough sheep for sale in my village, so I can only take some from you. I see, that's great. I'll come and see what kind of restaurant you are opening soon. Of course, you're welcome. The 28th is a good day, 3 days later. You must come and support us when it opens. Don't worry, I will. Then I will leave the bones for you from the day after tomorrow. Deal. The mutton is 25 coppers per pound and 10 coppers for the bones. What do you think? No need, just 5 coppers will do. If you don't want it, we usually clean it and feed it to the dogs. Then you better not regret it when my business is doing well, laughed Zhou Ying. Don't worry, I won't regret it. Alright, thank you, Uncle Liu. By the way, why don't you go over there for dinner tonight? You can also try the taste of the lamb bones. No, I'll wait until you're opening. I have an important guest coming over tonight. Alright, I'll be going back then. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she turned around and returned to her own restaurant. Then, she gave Zhao Qing the recipe for making the lamb spine hot pot. From now on, I'll leave the lamb spine hot pot and lamb bone soup to you. As for the herbal cuisine, well, decide the menu and make it after we've decided. Understood. I'll go and prepare now. Alright. We'll be eating lamb spine hot pot tonight then. Zhou Ying returned to the main house and saw Gu Qingrui reading a book. She paused and asked, "Aren't you supposed to be busy over there?" Not really. The main thing happening over there is the renovation, so there's no need to keep a close eye on it. Gu Qingrui pulled her into his arms and kissed her on the cheek. It's been hard on you. Why don't we hire another manager to help support the front, and you can command from behind? Besides, there are some things that need to be done by you personally, and you might not be able to handle them. Sure, but finding a suitable manager is not easy. If we put up a notice, those interested will keep an eye on it. At that time, well, just ask around about his character. Oh right, there are also the waiters, as 3 is not enough. We need at least 6, or else we won't be able to handle it. Alright, you should write a notice, and well, put it up later. Zhou decided and took out the stationaries from her interspace. Gu Qingrui immediately got up and started to prepare. At that time, Zhou added, by the way, we also need to add people in the kitchen. Find 2 to do odd jobs and 2 to wash the dishes. Alright, there's quite a number of people we still need. Gu Qingrui sighed. Then, he bent over and started writing the notice. While he was doing that, Zhou designed the waistcoat and outfit for the restaurant staff. It could unify their clothing and keep them sanitary, especially with a cooking hat. It would be troublesome if any hair fell into the pot. People came to the door in the afternoon, not long after the notice was put up. The additional kitchen helper and dishwasher positions were quickly taken by 4 strong women. As for the waiters, Zhou had picked those who were literate. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how to write down customer orders. They didn't expect to recruit 4 at a time, and 2 were originally this Dongxing restaurant's employees. Zhou hesitated for a moment before accepting them, but she still warned, this isn't the original Dongxing restaurant, and we're not doing what we did before. If you want to work here, then do it well. Otherwise, please don't blame me for firing you when the time comes. Don't worry, boss, we understand this, and we will definitely do our best. Okay. You only have one chance. Cherish it. Chapter 143 Sun Hongliang. While preparing the lamb spine hot pot in the evening, Qian Zhuang and Gu Erjiang arrived. Zhou introduced them to everyone and told them to sit down and have dinner. After the meal, the 4 climbed into the donkey cart and left home together. Gu Erjiang smacked his lips in satisfaction as the wind blew, saying, "Sister-in-law, how did you think of cooking with lamb bones? It's delicious, and I'm sure stuffed. Winter is the season to eat mutton, but sheep don't have much meat to begin with. It would be a pity to throw away all the bones, so we had to think of a way to eat them." Zhou was flattered. That's true. Sheep aren't pigs, and you really can't get much meat from one. Gu Erjiang nodded in agreement. Hee, since it's trying out the dishes over these 2 days, can we go over? You don't have to pay us our daily salary. Qian Zhuang asked. Sure, but you can't just eat but give more suggestions. Zhou paused for a moment and added, by the way, when you collect the vegetables, remember to collect some fungus, such as shiitake mushrooms, tea tree mushrooms, and other mountain products. Also, buy as many white sesame seeds as you can. Alright, leave this to us. You can also buy winter bamboo shoots. Gu Qingrui echoed. Understood. Qian Zhuang nodded. In the evening, Tian Zhuang replied that he could start work the next day. Therefore, the next day, the 3 went to their manor and took a sheep to the restaurant. Over the next 2 days, Zhou stayed in the restaurant during the day to guide them in serving new dishes and establishing the menu. At the same time, she gave a few simple training to the waiters and assigned them to wear red clothes and hats. Of course, the kitchen staff also had their uniforms, but they were all changed to white. In the meantime, the copper pot, skewers, and charcoal were delivered one after another. After Zhou taught everyone how to use them, she focused on teaching Tian Zhuang how to make skewers and barbecue them. It was just that they had yet to find a suitable manager for the restaurant. Just as Zhou was about to do it herself, Manager Lu came in with a man in his 20s and said, "Mrs. Zhou, have you found a suitable manager?" "Not yet." "Do you have someone suitable to recommend?" Zhou glanced at the man behind Manager Lu. At the same time, she was also a little surprised, as she didn't expect such a young man to have frostbite scars all over his face. "Smart, this is my nephew, Sun Hongliang. He used to be the assistant manager of another restaurant in the north. Now that there's a natural disaster happening, he came to me. But I don't know if you'll want him." "There's a disaster in the north." "What disaster?" Zhou asked in surprise. "Snowstorm, giving snow that's 1 meter deep." Sigh, there was just a drought half a year ago. Who expected that it would suddenly snow this heavily? Wouldn't this kill the people in the north? The weather is abnormal, huh? Zhou commented and looked at Sun Hongliang. "Mr. Sun, how's your accounting? This is the account book I made before. Please have a look." Sun Hongliang took a book from his clothes and handed it to her. Zhou opened it and took a look. The daily income of the restaurant, all spending, and the overall amount were clearly stated. "All right, the manager here is mainly in charge of accounting and greeting guests. There shouldn't be any problems with these two, right?" "No, I've done all these before." "That's good. Your monthly salary is 5 taels of silver. Come over early tomorrow." Zhou paused and added, "About the cold sores on your face, no worries about that, I will get it treated as soon as possible. Remember to change into new clothes tomorrow and come over early in the morning to prepare for the opening." Zhou reminded and looked at Manager Lu. "Uncle Lu, I have to let him stay for a while to familiarize himself with the dishes in the restaurant." Chapter 144 Grassland Taste, It's What He Should Do. "You guys go ahead." After Manager Lu finished, he looked at Sun Hongliang and said, "Since Mrs. Zhou gave you a chance, you must do your best." "Don't worry, uncle. I will do my best." Sun Hongliang bowed. After the two of them sent off Manager Lu, Zhou took Sun Hongliang to the kitchen and introduced him to the main dishes in the restaurant. Finally, she said, "Bring a menu home later and note the main points. Also, there will be a 30% discount event tomorrow. We'll only charge 70% of the total price, which is one of our publicity highlights. You must remember it well. In addition, we have a membership point system. If anyone spends 10 taels of silver tomorrow, you will issue them a membership card until you have issued all 100 cards. After that, tell them they could get a 10% discount with the card. Of course, the points would not be recorded after the discount. The customer can get back 10 silver taels for every 100 silver taels spent. That means there are 2 different ways to discount, which is a good way to attract customers." Sun Hongliang commented. "Yes, there are only 100 membership cards. I'll bring them back tomorrow." "Understood." "Oh right, where's your hometown? How far is it from here?" "It's almost near the Northern Territory, about 1,200 miles from here. But don't worry, several counties are between us, so the refugees rarely reach here. I only came here because I have relatives here." "When do you plan to go back?" Sun Hongliang shook his head. "Our house has already collapsed. If I can continue to make a living here, I will stay." "That's good. You don't have to be so polite to me, it sounds awkward. Just talk to me casually in the future." Alright, I understand. Okay, dress up tomorrow and come early." Zhou then handed him a menu. "See you tomorrow." Sun Hongliang bowed and turned to leave. After returning home that night, Gu Qingrui went to the village to inform the guests he was planning to invite. After dinner, the two entered the interspace. Zhou printed 100 cards on special printing paper used for business cards. The front of the membership card was printed with the traditional characters of a Grassland Taste membership card, in gold. There was also a picture of a grassland shepherd in the background. The back was empty, and she planned to use a quill to add the members' information. This way, it would play an anti-forgery role to a certain extent. Finally, she used the same paper to print 100 copies of the menu. You shouldn't do this as this paper isn't waterproof, and it'll be destroyed if the customers aren't careful. Gu Qingrui walked over and reminded her. Then what do you think we should do? We can't possibly laminate it, right? There will be problems if others see it. Zhou turned her head and asked. I remember we received a batch of transparent waterproof paint before, the kind used to paint furniture, so we can try that. If someone asks, just say that you use tree oil, and no one will look into it. Then let's try that. Zhou agreed and went to a warehouse to find the paint. After mixing the ingredients according to the ratio instructed, she found a brush and lathered it on a membership card. She didn't expect the effect to be so good, as even the handwriting wasn't affected. Then, she painted all the membership cards, dried them, and swiped the other side. She gathered them all after they dried. The next morning, because they no longer had to make tofu, the two carried the hot pot base ingredient Zhou had prepared beforehand and went out in new clothes. After they reached the restaurant, Sun Hongliang and the rest were already prepared. They hung a red silk cloth on the signboard and went up and greeted them politely. They didn't stay long at the entrance and handed over the restaurant's opening to Sun Hongliang. In the backyard, Zhou walked to Fang Qing, who was cutting meat, and asked, Fang Qing, have you done what I asked you to do yesterday? Chapter 145 Opening 1. Yes, mistress, it's all done. They should be here soon. Just as Fang Qing finished speaking, someone knocked on the back door. He immediately went to open the door and saw a few young beggars walking in. The group leader asked, Brother Fang, we're here. Do you mean what you said? Of course, 2 pounds of polished rice per person. Fang Qing affirmed and looked at Zhou. Our boss is here. If you don't believe me, you can ask her. That's right. We agreed on 2 pounds per person. Why don't we give it to you now? Zhou said. No need, but can you change it to black noodles? That way, we can eat for a longer time. No problem, 3 pounds of black noodles each, and they'll give you 1 pound of lard as a gift. Then it's settled. The leader immediately agreed, then turned around and pulled Fang Qing to ask for the brochure, as if he feared she would return on her words. Zhou smiled and didn't speak. Instead, she picked up the sliced lard and went to the kitchen to stir-fry the hot pot base ingredients. The locals here rarely ate spicy food, so she made a mild spice base. At the same time, she also boiled a pot of bones with mushroom soup. Together with Xiao Cheng's lamb spine hot pot, it should be enough. The remaining soup base had to be slowly pushed out, or there would be no surprises in the future. After she was done, she began to mix the sauce. As for Gu Qingrui, he took a look at the skewers. After ensuring they passed the test, he helped cut the mutton into pieces. Soon, a few beggars began shouting on the street with their brochures. They were also smart enough to find well-dressed people to distribute the flyers. In the afternoon, they even turned around and went to the Yunshan Academy in town. It was full of scholars and was also where rich people gathered. At the same time, Sun Hongliang came over and began to get busy with the waiters. Soon, Manager Lu came with a congratulatory gift, followed by Dr. Luo. The patriarch, the clan elders, the village chief, Father Gu, and even the second Uncle Gu were here. Finally, it was Chang Shun, the head of their manor. As for Uncle Nien, although he was invited, he didn't come as he didn't like to stand out. Father Gu and second Uncle Gu looked at the huge restaurant with complicated expressions. Who would have thought that the person they had abandoned would have the ability to support such a big restaurant? If they had known earlier, he would not have taken that step no matter what. After everyone in the village sat down, second Uncle Gu looked at the patriarch and asked, "Brother, do you know who hired Zhou? Such a big restaurant must have a powerful person backing it." "If you don't know, how would I know? If there's good food, just eat it," the patriarch warned. The opening was a big day. If they dared cause trouble, he would definitely teach them a good lesson. Father Gu and second Uncle Gu were embarrassed, but they weren't stupid. It was obvious that Qingrui and his wife were going up the ladder, so why would they find trouble with them? Even if there were something, they would discuss it in private. Next, a few neighbors on the same street came in. Zhou Huiming came in with a few county and town officials when it was almost time to open. Seeing Sun Hongliang, he was stunned. It's you, where's?" When he said this, he suddenly remembered Gu Shengruo's request and immediately changed his words. "Should I call for the head chef?" "You're talking about Manager Zhou, right?" "That's right, Manager Zhou. I've brought her a few distinguished guests today, so it's better for her to come out and get to know them. Please wait a moment." Sun Hongliang turned and ran to the back kitchen. He called Zhou out, and Gu Qingrui followed. Chapter 146 Opening 2, Mr. Zhou, Brother Zhou. The couple stepped forward and saluted. "Why are you acting like an outsider? We were family 500 years ago, so calling me Big Brother Zhou is much nicer." Zhou Huiming pointed at Zhou Ying and said. Then, he pointed to a middle-aged man with a mustache who was in his 30s and introduced him. "This is our county's new county mayor, Mr. Kong. He is also this year's top scholar. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Kong." The couple immediately bowed. "You're welcome. I am here with Mr. Zhou for a delicious meal, so we'll have to ask for your recommendations." Mr. Kong smiled as he stepped forward to help them up. Zhou Huiming then introduced them to the newly appointed county governor. He was a tall and thin man in his 40s with a mustache. He was also one of the few top scholars in the county, and his name was Bai Jinping. Then it was the secretaries and the advisor. The last was the town chief, Tian Jingzhong, who was also the constable of this town. He was a man in his 40s, and his stomach was as big as a pregnant woman's. After the introduction, Sun Hongliang immediately walked over and said anxiously, "Manager Zhou, it's time for the opening." "So. Then let's start." Zhou Ying decided and said to Zhou Huiming, "Big Brother Zhou, are you interested in attending the opening ceremony?" "Sure, let's go together with Brother Gu then." Zhou Huiming nodded and walked out with Gu Qingrui. Seeing this, the others also hurriedly followed. When Sun Hongliang saw this, he immediately arranged for the workers outside to start setting off the firecrackers. Zhou Ying scattered the fruit candies wrapped in oil paper she had prepared earlier into the crowd. At the same time, the sound of cannons rang out. Gu Qingrui and Zhou Huiming each pulled down the red silk on one side. In an instant, the black and red characters of House of Grassland Taste were presented in front of everyone. There were also 2 cartoon figures of a cow and a sheep drawn on the banner. Everyone's eyes lit up, and the children cheered. After a while, Sun Hongliang stepped forward and thanked everyone. Then, he told them about the 30% discount and the membership card. There are different kinds of food with a unique experience here. Everyone is welcome to come to the House of Grassland Taste and try it. So would the ingredients used be from the grassland? Someone in the crowd asked. It seems so, with mutton as the main selling point. Let's try them out and see how special they claim to be. The person to his left answered, let's go. There's a 30% discount today, and in the future, it'll only be 10% at most. It's a waste not to take advantage of it. The person on his right added. Afterward, the three walked into the restaurant together, and Sun Hongliang quickly welcomed them in. On the other hand, Gu Qingrui brought Zhou Huaiming and the others, including manager Lu, into a private room on the second floor. Finally, at everyone's request, they were arranged to go to the chess-decorated room. Zhou Ying personally prepared a pot of the most expensive tea sold here, the sparrow's tongue. At the same time, she also prepared a plate of snacks, fried broad beans with crispy peanuts. Finally, she warmed a pot of water for them on the stove and asked, "Sirs, is there anything you don't like, maybe not too spicy or stimulating?" "Oh, are there so many options on your menu?" Manager Lu asked in surprise. "I guess so. The mutton is slightly gamey to some, and so is the chili. So if you can't eat spice, we'll have to arrange other dishes. We're here to taste the food anyway, so you can just arrange it for us. If there's a taboo, you can just tell us later." Zhou Huaiming said. "All right, then I will go and make the arrangements." Zhou Ying responded and turned to go out. She arranged a slightly spicy hot pot with cabbage, radish, winter melon, agarwood, blood tofu, white tofu, shrimp, fish, shredded pork, tofu, and vermicelli. The meat used in the hot pot was naturally mutton ribs. Chapter 147 Opening 3. After much consideration, she arranged for some skewers and 3 light dishes, such as asparagus, tofu, and dried eggplant with garlic. They arranged 3 more side dishes, a plate of Sichuan pickled vegetables, sweet and sour garlic, and a plate of mixed radishes. The skin of the radish was crunchy, and the red color made it appetizing. At the other end, Gu Qingrui was carrying tea and snacks to the patriarch and the rest of the people sitting in the hall. "Elders, shall we escort you to the private room upstairs?" "No, there are limited private rooms. I think there will be more people coming in, so it's better to leave it to the rich. Just give us more delicious food, and it's fine." The patriarch shook his head. "Have these as your starter. The food will be ready in about 15 minutes. "Qingrui, is that Lord Zhou, the second son of the general, Zhou Huaiming?" Second Uncle Gu asked in a low voice. "Yes, but he's on an errand right now, so we'd better pretend we don't know." "How did you two meet?" "I've treated his illness once." "You guys eat up, I still have to prep more stuff in the kitchen." Gu Qingrui turned around and walked to the back kitchen. "Don't tell me this restaurant is his." Second Uncle Gu looked at Father Gu with uncertainty. Father Gu rolled his eyes at him. Gu Qingrui didn't reveal anything, so how would he know? However, even if it didn't belong to Zhou Ying, it might have been Gu Shengruis. Otherwise, Zhou Huaiming wouldn't have brought other officials to support them. "Oh, right, the third prince is guarding the navy at Dongyang town. Could it be that they've gotten in touch with the third prince?" The patriarch looked at them, exchanging looks, and hit the table in a bad mood. He warned vaguely, "Do what you're supposed to do. You've just sunk your ship, so it's better not to stick your heads out. Otherwise, you'll be beaten down." He hadn't thought much about it before and assumed the Qiao family bullying the Gu family was because of an old grudge. However, this time, the Qiao family's incident implicated the former county governor and his wife's family. Thinking about it this way, this matter was much more complicated than they thought. It was better to have their heads down for a few years. Father Gu nodded. He also knew something was wrong, but since General Zhou's son was here, there shouldn't be a problem as long as they didn't overstep their boundaries. In a small noodle shop diagonally across, the previous manager of Dongxing restaurant, Wang Quan respectfully said to the young man in his 20s, "Young master, did you see them? It's the man standing with Zhou Huaiming and the woman giving out sweets who saved Zhou Huaiming. I can see that. They're young, but they sure are capable." Qiao Lanqing snorted coldly. The young man was Elder Qiao's son, previously studying abroad. "What about the thing I asked you to do? Can my mother and Lon Lon be exchanged?" he asked. Constable Li said that we can only exchange for one of them. Otherwise, without restraint, it would be troublesome if rumors spread when they arrive. I can only change one. Yes, we can only change one. Besides, he's being watched closely by that Zhou guy. We can't do many things, so we have to exchange as soon as possible. Qiao Lanqing hesitated for a moment before saying, "Then let him do it according to the situation. He'll get whoever he can." Understood. At this point, Wang Quan paused and continued, "By the way, young master, there are 2 workers who were previously working in our restaurant working there now. Should we get in touch with them? Are you stupid? If even you know they used to be employees of the Dongxing restaurant, how could they not know? Since they knew and still hired them, they would definitely be watched. We can't make any moves now, at least not before Zhou Huaiming leaves, or else all of us are dead." Chapter 148 Opening, 4th. Soon, Zhou Huaiming and the others were about to pay the bill. Zhou Ying walked out and said, "Big brother Zhou, you're treating me like an outsider now. Why are you paying at your restaurant? Today is different as I'm treating them. Otherwise, they'll think that I'm not sincere." Zhou Huaiming laughed and looked at Sun Hongliang. "Bill please. Also, give me one of those membership cards." "Sure, please wait a moment." Sun Hongliang glanced at Zhou Ying, and seeing that she didn't stop him, he lowered his head and got to work. Zhou Ying looked at them and said, "Sirs, how do you like the food? If you have any suggestions, please let us know. We can improve it." "Yes, yes. Don't be polite. Just say what you have to say." Zhou Huaiming turned his head and added. Soon after, he was the first to speak up. "I like the food. It's just that I'll have to go back and change my clothes after this meal." Yes, it'll be good if it can be ventilated." County Mayor Kong shook his head and added, "But the weather is too cold, so that will be difficult. We have to think of a way to solve this. I'll think about it later." Zhou Ying nodded in agreement. To be honest, she had forgotten about this. However, even if she did not forget, there was no ventilation system in this period. It seemed that she had to find a carpenter to modify an exhaust fan. "Does anyone else have more suggestions?" she asked. "The dishes in your restaurant are indeed delicious, but the overall taste is slightly bland. The people in our area have a preference for a strong taste, after all." Manager Lu said. "That's true, but the numbing and spice are just to my taste. I'll come and try the other pots when I'm free." Tian Jingzhong said with a smile. "You're welcome at any time." Zhou Ying nodded. As for the others, they were all fine and didn't raise any opinions. They might have had nothing to say. After Zhou Huaiming got the VIP-looking membership card, the others also asked for one. Zhou Ying then sent them out after everything was done. Then, she sent the patriarch and the others out but didn't accept their money. The response he got was that the food was good, but the restaurant's interior was a little too stuffy. After a busy morning and 4 whole turnovers in the afternoon, everyone was exhausted. In particular, a few workers had run so much that their legs were jellified. Gu Shengruo's hands trembled as he cut the meat, and Zhou Ying's heart ached when she saw this. She stepped forward and held his hand. "You've worked hard, Rui. Let's not use a knife in the afternoon and switch to using a shredder." No, it'll be troublesome if we're discovered. Gu Qingrui shook his head. I'm talking about the guillotine-like knife-cutting tool, we can try that. After lunch, they cleaned the kitchen and returned to their rooms to rest. Zhou took out a guillotine meat cutter from her interspace. Then the husband and wife sliced the meat in the kitchen. Because of the cold weather, they were not afraid of the sliced meat sticking together. So, the two of them worked together for the entire afternoon. After finishing that, Zhou stir-fried more base ingredients and mixed more dipping sauce. She didn't care about anything else. Most of the people who came in the evening were students at the academy. Some came to taste it after hearing the news, but there weren't many of them, so the overall number of customers was much lower. After sending off the last guest, Zhou waited for Sun Hongliang to calculate the bill before asking, "Brother Sun, how much is today's revenue?" 778 taels, the total gross profit is 352 taels. Of course, the remaining 5 sets of lamb chops are not counted. If we count them in, we should be able to add another 2 taels. Sun Hongliang said. Chapter 149. Specially waiting for them, it looks like our hard work wasn't in vain. I see that there's still some lamb spine left, so let's have a hearty meal and finish all the remaining dishes. How about it? Zhou glanced at the tired crowd and suggested. Li Yu, in particular, was nodding off. She was about to fall asleep. However, they immediately perked up when everyone heard Zhou Ying's offer. Then, everyone started to set the food up, and soon, the hot pot was served. After the meal, Zhou spoke up, saying, "Everyone looks tired, so remember to boil some water to soak your feet. You all can wake up a bit later tomorrow. They'll have to trouble you to get the meat earlier tomorrow." She looked at Fang Qing and added. "Don't worry, madam. I won't delay anything." "All right, we'll be going back now." Zhou ended the discussion as she stood up. "It's already so late. May I humbly suggest that you two stay here for the night?" Li Xing suggested. "No, I still have things to do at home. Remember to lock the doors and windows at night before going to bed." After Zhou finished reminding them, she walked home with Gu Qingrui. What they didn't expect was for Tian Zhuang to follow them. Gu Qingrui turned his head and said, "Brother Tian, you don't have to come with us, and well, just let your sister know that you won't be coming back for the night." "It's fine. I'm worried about the 3 of them at home. It's all right since I have you 2 to accompany me. Let's go." Tian Zhuang explained as he headed forward. The couple could only follow behind him. In the village, Zhou could hear Zhuang's aggrieved whining from afar. She turned her head and asked, "Rui, why don't we bring Zhuang along when we go out tomorrow? We shouldn't starve him anymore. You can take him out if you want to. It'll be safer to have him with us on the way back, but don't leave anything valuable in the house." "I know. Brother Tian," Gu Qingrui said when they arrived at his house. "We will set off tomorrow at 11 a.m. tomorrow." "All right. Just call me when you're leaving." Tian Zhuang walked home after saying goodbye. After the couple returned home, Gu Qingrui went to heat the brick bed while Zhou entered her inner space and quickly made half a pot of black noodle soup for Zhuang, adding 2 sticks of sausage to it. Zhuang only stopped whining after he had a hot meal. After that, the husband and wife went to the inner space to take a hot bath before going to sleep. The next day, the couple cleaned up the house and rushed to town with Tian Zhuang and Zhuang. It was another busy day, but because there was no discount, the number of people was smaller. But their daily income was still more than 200 taels of silver, which relieved Zhou. Otherwise, she was afraid she could not afford to hire this many people. They used up an average of 4 sheep and about half a cow, so 200 taels should be enough to cover their daily expenses. As things got more stable, Zhou Ying's daily tasks were reduced. She no longer needed to do anything besides cook the base ingredients and dipping sauce. Mrs. Li took over the task of slicing meat. Zhou Ying found an environmentally friendly black paint to modify the meat slicing machine to pass off as something normal to avoid attracting attention. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The restaurant's business was on the right track, and Gu Shengruo's clinic was getting busier. One evening, as Zhou Ying brought Zhuang home, they saw Father Gu wandering around their house as soon as they entered the village. When he saw her, he stood still. This was how Zhou Ying knew he was waiting for her or Gu Qingrui. "Father, are you all right?" She walked over after a moment of hesitation. Father Gu nodded and smiled dryly. "Why did you come back alone? Where's Qingrui? He still has patients, and he might have to stay at the clinic tonight." Chapter 150 Regret. It's not safe for you to go back and forth on your own. If it's late, don't come back. Father Gu said. "I understand, Father." "Then, I'll leave you to your work." After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she went home with Zhuang. Father Gu wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, he didn't call out to her. After Zhou Ying had gone far away, she wondered why Father Gu was looking for them this time. Could it be to borrow money? After that, she shook her head and tossed him to the back of her mind. When she got home, she went to the shed and let Zhuang go. Zhou Ying then went to her interspace to make some shredded chicken porridge. After giving Zhuang half a bowl, she ate hers with a fried tomato egg. After that, she started to work in the space. On the other end, after Father Gu returned home, Mrs. Lu hurriedly asked, "Darling, how is it? Did they agree?" Father Gu shook his head. "Only Zhou Ying came back, so I was embarrassed to ask." "Darling, Zhou Ying is the one who can cook, not Qingrui." Mrs. Lu spoke with a speechless expression. "You have the nerve to ask for something from your daughter-in-law. I'm not that thick-skinned." Father Gu glared at her. "Then why don't we go to the clinic to find Qingrui tomorrow? Otherwise, our small shop won't be able to support itself any further." Mrs. Lu said with a smile. "Then let's talk about it tomorrow, and let's have dinner." Father Gu sat down at the main table after that. When Mrs. Lu saw this, she told Mrs. Sun and Mrs. Gua to set the table. The next day, Father Gu went to the clinic early in the morning but was told Qingrui was at the restaurant, so he had no choice but to go over. When he came over, the couple was having breakfast. Gu Qingrui was stunned for a moment before asking, "Father, have you eaten yet? If not, you can make do with it here. I've already eaten. You guys hurry up and eat, and I'll wait for you in the front." Father Gu said, and he went to the main hall. At the same time, Father Gu complained inwardly. This early in the morning, and he's eating millet porridge, baked biscuits, meat, and even some side dishes. If this is just making do, what did I eat for breakfast? Pig food. It seemed that the young couple had gotten back on their feet. Perhaps they could resume their lives in the capital one day. Thinking of this, there was a burst of regret. Zhou Ying wasn't a jinx but a money-making girl. He couldn't help but start disliking Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Yao for their actions. He would not have acted so coldly against the couple back then if they hadn't been fanning the flames. After he left, Zhou Ying told him about Father Gu waiting for them yesterday. "There must be something he wants to talk to you about. Be careful, and don't fall into his trap. Don't worry, he's not my biological father. I won't be affected by false kinship." Gu Qingrui nodded. After that, the two of them finished their breakfast quickly. After the meal, Gu Qingrui went to the front, while Zhouing took the bowls and chopsticks to the kitchen and started her work. Gu Qingrui went over with a pot of tea and a plate of peanuts left over from yesterday. After sitting down, he poured his father a cup of tea and said, "Father, have a cup of tea to warm your body." "Aye." Father Gu responded, then pointed to the exhaust fan on the window and asked, "What's that? Why is there a hole in the window? Wouldn't it make here?" "That's an exhaust fan." Previously, everyone felt that the smell of smoke was too strong, so we got a carpenter to make that. "Is it useful?" "It works, but it can only move when someone is pulling it." "Doesn't that mean you have to recruit more people?" "Yes, I hired a few beggars, and they will come over to help out during mealtimes." It didn't cost much. As soon as he said that, Father Gu thought of the opening day when a group of beggars was giving out flyers on the street. He couldn't help but say, "You're sure good at hiring. Beggars are much cheaper than normal people." Chapter 151. A good idea, I guess you can call it that way, but it's not that complicated to hand out flyers. These beggars can get a meal with their work too. "You're right." Father Gu coughed twice and added, "I came here today to ask for your help." "Do say, and we will definitely help if we can." Gu Qingrui nodded. Because he wasn't surprised, Father Gu knew that Zhouing had most likely told Gu Qingrui about him looking for them. He openly declared his request, "Do you know that your Aunt Lu and second aunt are running a pastry shop? I've seen them selling royal desserts and pastries." "Yes, but it's too expensive and hard to sell in this small town, so Father Gu was a little embarrassed when he said this. But in the end, he continued, "So, I am here to ask Zhouing if she has any ordinary dessert recipes. Otherwise, I'm scared that the small shop won't be able to survive. I can only discuss this with Zhouing, as I don't know the details. Please hurry up. I'll head back for now." Father Gu stood up and said, "All right, I'll give you a reply tonight." "Sure, you continue your work." Father Gu turned around and walked out after he finished speaking. After sending him off, Gu Qingrui returned to the kitchen and told Zhouing about the matter. Zhouing laughed. He still has the nerve to ask for this. So shameless. He's thick-skinned, but what do we do now? Are we giving it to him or not? It's simple to make mung bean cakes and the like, so I don't believe they don't know those. They're most likely interested in the desserts Chun Yang makes. But that's our signature dessert, and we can't give it to them. Alright, let's give them the mung bean cake, red bean cake, yellow pea cake, and chestnut cake recipes. Alright, I'll reply to them this evening. Gu Qingrui went to his clinic after saying his goodbyes. After he left, Zhouing felt that the desserts they were offering were too little, so she taught Chun Yang the recipe for a series of rice cakes and steamed cakes, asking her to try making them when she was free. At the same time, she was also indirectly letting the Gu family know she wasn't someone they could bully. After she was done, she began to stir-fry 2 pots of hot pot ingredients. After she saw that the base ingredients were enough in the afternoon, she mixed the dipping sauce for the hot pot and went to the manor after telling Gu Qingrui in his clinic. Because the restaurant needed tofu and vermicelli, it wasn't a good idea to always make them in her interspace. She planned to build a workshop in the manor so that the people in the manor could have some income and she could relax a little. When she arrived at the manor, she immediately found Chang Shun and told him about the matter. She asked, "Uncle Chang, what do you think?" "It's a good idea. There's no work in the village now, and the strong laborers are going to the labor market daily for work. But now that it's getting cold, there's not much work on the dock. If we can build a workshop, it'll solve a big problem. The best thing about this is that we can work all year round." "Alright, this matter is settled then. However, beans are scarce in our area because of the bean sprout hype this year. Well, use what we have in our own restaurant this year. Well, expand the production when the river opens tomorrow and import beans from other places. What about the beans for this year? Do we buy them from the grain shop? We do have to buy some, but I've saved some before. When the workshop is done, we'll use those beans first. Alright, where should we set up the workshop? Let's set it up in the second courtyard first. Well, build a workshop next year when we're renovating the house, so you have to maintain the house well for now. Sure, don't worry. That's all. I'll leave the recruitment to you, so remember to find someone who has difficulties at home but is clean and tidy. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.